Recording. All right. How you doing, guys? Good to be back. Good to see everybody. We'll give it a couple of seconds here just to make, just to give anybody else jumping in or coming in late a chance. How did it go? Oh, let me grab this. Let me fix the mic. How, do I have to let people in? No. How did it go? Everybody's work seemed to be pretty consistent. We had some problems with the version of Unreal or the level and this particular version of the level in Unreal. What was odd was somebody told me, I forgot who it was, but someone in the queue in the submissions told me that they were able to just run the scene as is in 420 with no problems, which I thought was odd. Yeah. Hey. Oh, cool. I got to look here. I can see Eddie. No, I can see Gingy. Hi, Gingy. Anyway, okay. Yeah, so there were some issues with the level. I appreciate everybody getting around that, having to version back to an earlier version of Unreal. If anyone else had a workaround or had a way to get around that, or did not have to go back to a previous version of Unreal to make that run, I would love to hear how you got that to work. I have the scene here. This is actually working in version 4.2. And as you can see up here, it's called version 420 fixed. I had a friend of mine who works in Unreal professionally and is a tech artist by trade. He took a look at it and he said that there were two systems in here, one having to do with the AI and there was something else having to do with the UI. And he actually the AI I think was okay because he said he took them both out and then the scene worked, but the AI didn't, you know, the little characters didn't move. And then he got him. I think he got that to come back. He commented it out. So it's just an issue with Unreal. Apparently Unreal just being old and being, or not Unreal. This level was old, and there we go. See, so the guys are actually spawning. But they were systems that are not really supported anymore. Especially, he said the one with the UI was something that was just it was a call to an old system that isn't really supported anymore. So this level may continue to have problems in the future, and I might have to figure out something else. But I think for a few more classes, we can still use it, being as that, thanks to my friend, we were able to get around that issue. So I would actually like to put this up on the folder in the folder where the project files are, and maybe if one or two of you could download it and just check it and just see if on your end it also works out, that would be awesome. And what I'll do, it's not up there now. What I'll do is I will copy it up and maybe email a couple of you guys or just put a shout out on the forum. Cool, thanks, John. Yeah, you know what I'll do is I'll put it up there. I'll just put a shout out on the forum. You know, don't have to do it, but if someone has the bandwidth or the time to do it, I would just appreciate just a verification that, yeah, this works. Because it does kind of blow to, you know, while the class is in session, you know, they're like, sorry, we can't get this to run. Okay, so this seems all right. Just wanted to, you know, let you guys know that seemed to be somewhat fixed. And like I said, I'm not an Unreal guy, so once it starts getting into the weeds of the technicalities of why stuff breaks, you know, I kind of need to rely on people that have more experience with Unreal than I do. So while I have the scene open, just the one thing that I noticed in several scenes, right? I feel like every week I have a common comment that I make to most people, and I think for this week it was just one of think about your spots, your areas of bright, dark, your pools of light. And even in here, even in my particular example, I could probably go brighter. You know, now that I'm looking at it kind of with a new perspective, as I haven't seen it in a while, maybe it would be, you know, I can concede as well that maybe I need to go a little bit brighter in some areas. And the interesting thing too is all the lights don't have to be the same intensity. So you can have some that are a little brighter, some that are a little darker, and it's, you know, you give it a little bit of rhythm that way. But yeah, all the lights don't have to be the same intensity. It just has to feel like it makes sense. And then the other thing I think I mentioned on one or two people's submissions is with some of these lights, like I think it's totally cool to hang these lights here and there's a splotch of light, and especially from the perspective of the camera, you don't see where it's coming from. But personally, what kind of what gets me is when people have the volumetric on and then you just see that there's a cone there for no reason, right? So if from the camera's perspective, we were maybe like this and we were above the volumetric and you don't see where it's coming from, that to me sells a little bit more. But if you're in a situation where you just see this light like that, you see this cone spawning from nowhere, my personal suggestion is just remove the volumetric scattering, the value. Just set volumetric scattering to 0 just to take that out of the volumetric, and that generally will, in my opinion, make for a much a cleaner scene. And then inversely, what I was kind of suggesting on a few other people's scenes. Do I have 2 lights there? Dude, I have 2 lights there. That's a rookie move. Huh. Do I have 2 lights there? That's weird. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that right now. One of these lights is hitting the volumetrics. I'm not quite sure why I doubled up. That's probably not good. And I'll be the first to point out if you know, I make a lot of mistakes. So if something got a little tweaked, we'll figure it out. What I'm curious about is my light complexity. So do I have a lot of lights here, or am I just duplicating lights inadvertently? And if I look at my light complexity, I just want to see how crazy this gets. It's not too bad. You know, I think what I have is a static under a spot. Under a primary, but I could be wrong. Is this static? I bet you this is static. Yep, it's static. Okay. All right, cool. That's a little heavy for me, right? See how it's getting a little red in here from a perspective of lighting complexity, but overall, it's not too bad. Overall, I'm staying in generally in safe colors. Yeah, if this was production, I would maybe get a little bit more aggressive about tracking this down. I don't like to see stuff going into the red like that. But blue and green is fine, at least in the system in which I am working. And I bet you this is a contributor, right? So look, if I can take what's my radius? Attenuation radius. Let's cut that in half. Probably be a lot better. And if I go to my lit mode, let's see how much damage I did. You know, once again, it's a compromise, right? So everything in games is a compromise. And I have to decide, you know, if something is playing better or something is looking better. I kind of have to decide, like, how can I get that, you know, how can I get this to work in the most reasonable way? So what I did there is I reduced the radius, but I didn't like that the light was falling off as aggressively because I reduced the radius. So I just moved it up in space. Let's jump back into our, into our light complexity mode. Light complexity, much better, right? And I made a small adjustment. And there's other adjustments I can make, right? I'm still getting some hot spots in here, but right away, much better. You know, I can go in here, I can figure out, well, where's this light? That's a static one. Let's move it over a sec. That's a stationary one. Maybe his radius can be a little bit smaller. Maybe I can move him up or down to adjust that. But you know, this is a part of the process. Once the level is blocked in, it's very much a lot about optimization and iteration and just cleaning stuff up. And how can I make this more efficient? How can I make this look better? It is how can I make it look better, but it is also how can I make it play better? And you know, sometimes we do make compromises. Yes, it's easy for someone to show you a render that doesn't really play and it looks amazing, but when you take into the considerations of gameplay, of you know, where the player can see, where the player can traverse to, you know, you have to make certain choices, right? And it's not just that. It's what's my draw calls, how much memory is this level taking? You know, I will often have stuff that looks good and then have, not to say that they make it not look good, but I will have stuff that is looking really sweet. And then towards the end, I'll have to talk with tech art and talk with other departments that just are trying to figure out a way to get this level to run at frame rate. And I will have to reduce the quality of my shadows, or I will have to reduce the amount of my reflections. And it's just a give and take. You know, we are on this is a boat with limited resources, and we're trying to make it as fast and as efficient as possible. But if we overdo it, it's going to sink. So that's kind of the game that we play when we make games. Let's jump back. I don't really need this. I wasn't going to really get too deep as far as demoing anything in here. If there's anything, as always, if there's anything that you guys want to talk about or want to, you know a little bit more, ask, by all means, shout it out. And I might not know the answers, but I'll do my best to solve your or address your issues. But that's what I had for this week. I saw a lot of people that I just generally, most people I thought could have just pushed it a little bit more, mainly making your hotspots brighter, having a little bit more contrast, having a little bit more range, pushing the volumetrics up in the lava area. To me, that lava texture is really low res and it just looks like a fractal. So anything we can do with volumetrics or effects or anything to kind of make it a little bit nicer, I feel is really helpful. And a few of you had scenes where I thought they were looking good, and I gave you the same contrast, like you just need a little bit more contrast here. And I thought for a lot of you, it was really just a matter of reducing the sun or adjusting the sky. But it was nothing that, you know, hey, this demands a full relight. This is not working. You have to try again. There's nothing like that. It was just a matter of maybe easing back off the sun a little bit. You know, some of you guys had like that, you know, and I said, well, cut the sun in half or cut it down by 2/3 and see what happens. You know, if you give yourself more contrast. If I turn it off, this is with the sun off. So if I'm looking at this and this is still too bright, then I have to say, well, it's got to be my sky that's too bright. And I would go over here and do what I have to do. Let's see. Yeah, let's cut that in half. Right? So you'll start to, you can start to dial certain things in. If your shadows are too dark, then that means that there's too big of a gap between the value of your sky and the value of your sun, and you need to reduce the contrast, if you will. But it's just a give and take. And remember to recompile, because right now I am, what was that, 0.2? Right now I am changing the dynamic portion of the attribute. However, you're not getting the bounce light updating. You won't get the bounce light updating until you recompile the map. You just recompile it, because the light map is getting calculated in, or I'm sorry, the bounce light is getting calculated into the light maps. So just be conscious of that. And also be conscious of your reflections as well, even though this is kind of an odd little level and at a different perspective. The rules still apply, right? You're still going to want to have, you know, accurate-ish reflections for the areas that you're working in. Okay. Let's see. What was I going to talk about? Talked a little bit about a fixed scene. I talked a little bit about contrast in the level. And I talked a little bit about volumetrics. And like I said, just watching out for volumetrics in areas where you don't want them. And at the same time, using volumetrics to your advantage in areas where they can help you kind of cover up issues that that otherwise would make things look a little bit more low res. So for example, volumetric scattering, I can increase. Can I increase? Oh, is this static? Did I go? Oh, stationary. You get the point, right? Just making that a little bit heavier. Where's my exponential height fog? Looks like I need to. Sometimes what you do is you get to a limit where, see how I cranked up the, where was it? I cranked up the volumetric scattering. It's like at 3. Here, I'll put it at 10. And it's kicking, you know, it is kicking a bit more, but sometimes you just need to have everything be a little bit stronger, right? Sometimes you need to turn up the volume on everything and then turn down the volume on specific things. And in that case, what I would do is grab the exponential height fog and just increase the extinction scale. I'm just going to double it for the sake of argument. So now I'm making everything heavier. And in some cases, it's easier to do that. It's easier to make everything heavier and then go back and dial back 2 or 3 as opposed to dial up, you know, 12 or 15. So it's just a matter of whatever works better for you. But just realize that that's there as an option. Let me do that again. I'm just curious if I were to crank that up. Extinction scale. See, now it's getting weird on me. There it goes. This is producing an overall increase in the atmosphere in here. Let's go crazy. So maybe I don't want that, but maybe I want the headroom, which means maybe I want the headroom that I want these areas in the lava to get this hot, which means that then I would have to then go back and dial down everything else that's not this lava. It just depends. But either way, just want you guys to be aware of that as an option for your editing of the scenes. And yes, volumetrics do have a cost. They're not free, but we're already paying for them. So whether I make them brighter or less bright that's not really affecting my scene. They're already on. Whether they're on at 10 or they're on at 110, that doesn't make as much difference. All right. Does anybody have anything that they want to throw out or address or talk about? Hey Omar, saw on some job roles for junior lighting artists that they require you to know After Effects. How is After Effects used for lighting? It's really not used at all in games. That's kind of odd that was it a game job or was it like a VFX job? Because if it's a VFX job, and especially if it's like a smaller, you know, like a commercial house, they will want guys that know how to light and know how to composite, and After Effects would be a tool to do that. Oh, Rockstar, that's interesting. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know why they would want you to know After Effects. The only thing that we use sometimes, we haven't even done it yet, but you know how we're doing color lookup tables in Photoshop. As we are moving into more and more HDR 4K, you know, these high-res displays, we're going to start doing the color lookup. We're going to start doing the LUTs in HDR and HDR plus because. Oh, maybe it was Bruno. That's a good point. Maybe it's just HR. But as we move into these HDR pipelines, we're going to start doing HDR LUTs, and we're going to stop using Photoshop to author them. And tools that we're looking at for authoring HDR LUTs are going to be like Nuke would be a very expensive way to do it. It's a compositor, and it just has a couple of features that we would use for that kind of a workflow. But it's super expensive. We'd probably use something like Fusion, which we can get for pretty much free or cheap. And we don't need the functionality of Nuke. Nuke is a high-end compositing tool that they use for film. Fusion is also a compositor that is used in film. So it's possible that Rockstar is doing some kind of 3D LUT work and they're somehow using After Effects or using some kind of more robust compositor. But I would imagine that if you were applying for a job like that, as long as you had a rudimentary fundamental knowledge of After Effects, you'd probably be okay. You know, I don't think that you'd be doing anything crazy complicated. I don't think you're going to be doing like, you know, pulling color keys and pulling mats from color keys, I should say, and doing anything like that. Yeah, let me know if you let me know how that goes, man. If you're going to apply, good luck, and that would be awesome. You know, keep us posted. Let's see. Yeah, anything else? Anybody got anything else? Um, feel free to shout out. Hi. Oh, okay, Jinji. Can you tell me some good resources for good images and video? Do you mean like for reference? What do you mean images and video? Just like cool stuff to look at, or like reference? Um, yeah. Well, you know what? Something that I do is I keep a Tumblr page. Um, I have a Tumblr page, and I just kind of subscribe. You can do it with Pinterest as well, but I just on Tumblr I just kind of subscribe to concept art, you know, guitars, you know, cars, you know, whatever you're into. But there's a few channels that I follow that are just, it's just art, and it's just kind of nice to have a stream of art related content that's available to you. So, you know, when you have a couple minutes or you're in the bathroom, whatever it is, you know, hey, well, let me just look at some art. And sometimes you get ideas, you get cool ideas from that. Give me 1 second. I'll log into that and give you an example. So that's cool. ArtStation is cool. I get a little overwhelmed with ArtStation just because there's so many artists and there's so much stuff going on. It feels a little overwhelming. But I've been trying to work on my own ArtStation a little bit more, and I have also from time to time, just as I see things that I like, I will start to follow people. But just out of my own habit, I tend to be on Tumblr. I'm playing Hellblade these days. If you want to see some amazing lighting environments, I totally recommend you give it a try, folks. Cool. Yeah, is Hellblade the one that with the main character is like this schizophrenic girl that has like these different visions? Yeah, dude, I heard that one's really good. I get that one and Witcher and Dark Souls for some reason. I get those 3 games confused. But yeah, I hear Hellblade is cool. Is that, would you say that is a super long game? Is that like a 16-hour game, or is that like a 6-hour game or 8-hour game? 6 to 8. Is it pretty brutal as far as the difficulty level? Is it one of those games that's just like super hard? Game is easy. Oh, okay. All right. There must be I think it was Witcher then that was like super brutal. Yeah, Cyberpunk looks super awesome. Is that out yet? No, sadly. Yeah. Cyberpunk looks really cool. I have no idea if the gameplay is going to be cool. Have you guys seen, is it Paragon? Is that the one, the BioWare one where it's kind of like Destiny. It's kind of like futuristic. Anthem, my bad. Anthem. Yeah, you're right. That looks interesting, man. I don't know if that's going to be, if that one's going to be like really cool, or if it's going to be like visually, okay. You know, Destiny is not the most beautiful. It's a very nice looking game, but the reason that I play it so much is because my friends are on it. Whereas to a game like, what was the one with the dinosaurs? Oh my God, I can't think of it. You know what I'm talking about, right? No. The one with the robot dinosaurs. Anyway, it'll come to me in a second. But that game was beautiful. Horizon, yes, Horizon. That game was gorgeous, but you know, kind of a single player experience, and I kind of trailed off a little bit on that one. Both are valid, but it's just I find that the older I get, the less time I have to kind of complete things. I have to make more and more serious choices about what I'm going to do with my time, because you know it's just a lot of stuff to do. Let me see. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to log into my page here. Oh, come on. Sorry, guys. 1 second. I'm trying to multitask here, and I'm getting a little sidetracked. Yeah, you feel my pain. I'm also like really excited for Last Night, that little like side-scrolling pixel game that supposedly is coming out on PlayStation, and that is that to me is, it just looks super cool, man. I totally want to try that. Anyway, yeah, Jinji, I recommend stuff like that, like you know, and just for example, like this is what I'm talking about, you know. And there might be some pictures in here that are like not safe for work. So is what it is, dude. I don't control what people post. But you know, as an artist, I feel like, you know, I look at everything. So stuff like this, I mean, I'm into guitar, but even from a perspective of like, yeah, this is a picture of musical gear, but look at the rust and the wear and the texture and the patina on this. So these are all things that it's just good to look at, because when you see a surface in the game, you might say, oh, that reminds me of this image that I saw that has nothing to do with that. But it'll give you some inspiration, or it'll just say like, yeah, what I'm looking for is this. What I'm looking for are these values. And what I do is, I don't know if any of you guys use Tumblr, but you can add stuff. So you can say, add this to my feed. And what I add to my feed is not for people to follow me or watch. I don't think anybody follows me on Tumblr. What I add to my feed is stuff that is just things that I want to see again. Oh, that looks really cool. I want to remember that. I'll add that. You know, it might just be this purple, or it might be some concept art that somebody did. There's a couple people that I follow that are just visual, like graphic artists that just do crazy graphic art stuff. And I'll just add that to my feed just because I think it's good reference. I think this looks good, or I think that, you know what I mean? Like an astronaut playing pool with this color scheme is interesting to me. So that's one thing. Like I said, ArtStation I kind of follow, but ArtStation kind of overwhelms me a little bit. So I have a couple friends that post on ArtStation, and I'll follow them. I got a good friend of mine that just did a tutorial. Let's go to ArtStation real quick, and let's do. Yeah, my friend Christoph just did. I have no idea how to find videos. So anyway, he works on Uncharted. He does all these amazing hard surface models, and he teaches a painter class, Substance Painter, at Noman, and I think he's got a couple DVDs also out. If you get a chance, check him out. He's super good. And he did a video. He put up a lecture. Maybe it wasn't on ArtStation, but he put up a lecture on, I want to say in this particular one, it was using V-Ray, but he'll do them on Substance Designer. He'll do them on Substance Painter. He'll do stuff where that's oh, here, like you can click on his videos, and he'll talk about like how he does stuff and the methods that he uses. Like for example, this one, he did it all procedurally. So there's, I don't know if there's no UVs, or he just did it all with like projection nodes, so it doesn't matter what the UVs are. But it was, you know, sometimes it's just an example of a very specific workflow. So that is highly recommended. His name is Christoph Dess. He's super good. So there's lots of stuff, you know, there's lots of examples. There's lots of artists out there, you know. I did a thing on, in my last class, maybe we'll do this next time. My last class was asking me, I had a couple students that were kind of from a technical background. And so I was talking all this art stuff and talking about composition and talking about pools of light and gradients and transition of light and all this stuff. And he started asking me, well, can you show me some examples? Like, can you tell me like, where do I see this stuff? Like, you know, you're talking about it, but can you point out like some physical examples? And I did. And I went through and I did this whole thing of, I broke down, like I took a bunch of screenshots from different games and broke down like, look, here's how they're using shadows. Here's how they're using pools of light. Look at the gradients here. And then I went into, same thing. I did the same thing with movies. I said, okay, let's take a look at movies. Let's see where this is coming from, because we're not making this up in games. So we looked at a bunch of movies. Same thing, you know, look at the pools of light, look at the contrast, look at the color temperature contrast. And then I finally, I was like, all right, well, let's do one more. Let's look at master painters. And we looked at, you know, John Singer Sargent and Rembrandt and Vermeer, and we looked at all these guys, and it's the same thing. Look at the pools of light. Look at how they use contrast. Look at how they rim light their characters. Look how they draw the attention of the eye from one place to the other. It's all the same stuff. So it was, you know, it's something that we can kind of get into. I like talking about that, but you know, it's also, I feel it's good to be able to it was a good exercise for me to be able to say, I'm not just making this up. I'm going to point to examples in games, in movies, in art, where you're seeing these concepts. Like I'm not inventing anything. I'm not telling you how to do something that no one else has figured out. All that art is you take what those that have come before you have figured out, and you try to put your own spin on it and maybe inspire those that will come after you. And we're just all links in a chain. So that's my pontificating on that. Cool. Well, it's 10:30. We're about halfway through our session here. That's pretty much what I have from a perspective of little tutorials, or just talking about the week's assignment. Like I said, if anybody wants to shout anything out, I'm more than happy. So with that, with the time that we have left, and this is not going to take me very long, I kind of wanted to share a little bit of sky capturing that I did yesterday. We've been doing a lot of sky capturing at work for the purposes of putting skies in our game. Excuse me. And we're not just looking to get pretty skies in our game, but we are also looking for those skies to be physically accurate, to be physically correct, meaning the amount of energy that I get from my IBL is what you would have in the real world conditions. So I don't have a lot of pictures, but I thought I would throw these out and just kind of talk a little bit about what we were doing. So this is my buddy Chris, who works with us. We went up on the top of this hill. These images were all taken from my phone, so you're not actually looking at anything that was taken from the camera. But we can talk a little bit about the setup. This is the rig that we're using. And what this is this is called a nodal head. And how it works is the camera rotates around this axis right here, right? So we loosen it with this knob, and we can spin this around 360 degrees. And the reason that this head is shaped like this is so that the camera, when it rotates, we want it to rotate on what is called the focal node of the camera, which is kind of like where the lens meets the sensor, if you will. It's not exactly where the lens meets the sensor. Actually, what it is if you've ever seen like a diagram of a camera, the light comes in and it converges to a point, and then it actually flips around. The focal point is that point where it converges and it flips over. So camera focal point. Let's see if we can find an image, right? So that's the focal point. Basically, the image comes in. It's right here where it converges to a point. The reason that we want that is that sorry, Christoph. The reason that we want that is that that will rotating around that point, right? So if you imagine a line that's going straight up and down, rotating around that point of the camera's axis will will minimize or completely reduce the parallax. And the whole point with doing this is we want to have the least amount of parallax possible. So what we do is this camera is set up on this node. It spins in 160 degrees, and we're using a very wide angle lens. So what the camera can see is almost 180 degrees. It's really wide. And so it depends. Depending on the type of lens that you're using and what how you're using it, you might have to take more pictures or less pictures, but the principle is the same. We take a picture in around 360 degrees. In our case, we're doing it every 90 degrees. Like I said, depending on, if you're using like a 15 millimeter lens, you'd probably have to do it every 60 degrees. We have a super wide lens. We're able to get away with much wider. And so we take images of our surroundings. There were people up there. Those people were just there. But we take images of the surrounding, and then in software, we stitch them into a 360 degree lat long image that we can then apply to the game. The format is irrelevant as long as it's a fully panoramic, a fully 360 degree image. A lat long or a cube map or whatever is less relevant. Yeah, we saw a tarantula on the way back down. But The format is irrelevant. The point is that you want to capture all this information. And then the reason that you see these two tripods here is, do you see this little disc? It's kind of hard to see, but it's just a little white disc that we have here. That's called a spectralon, and that is a completely flat material that is a very it is a calibrated color of white, if you will, and it has no speck, or almost. It has the least amount of speck possible. It's completely flat. And what we do is we can measure the intensity of the light on that spectralon in the sun, and then we put it over here in the shade, right? And when the camera's pointing the other way, we literally just stand here, and our own shadows create the shade. And the point is, knowing how bright the light is in the sun and in the shade allows us to calculate the intensity of the light when we get it back into the computer. So that's why we do that. And because we're doing that, that allows us to have a very precise measurement of what our values are. And the idea is that if I put this sky in the game, the brightness that you're getting is equal to what you are actually getting on location. So I just thought it's kind of cool to kind of, we talk about the skies and capturing, and there's a lot of information out there. As a matter of fact, that website, No Emotion, was it HDR? Yes, No Emotion. So this website where you get a lot of the gear, he talks about this stuff. Here, this is a nodal head. It's a different brand. This is a promo control. We just rented this. This is super cool. It just automates all the bracketing, all the stuff that the camera does. But none of this stuff is, this is not top secret. You can find this information. And this guy here has a great breakdown of the process, the tools. It's a little bit old, but it's a great breakdown of the tools and the process. And notice here, he's saying he's using a 15 millimeter lens, and he was able to take a set of 6 images with 72-degree offsets. So we were doing 60 just because it's easier to calculate. But the amount of offsets that you have to do, meaning how many times you have to rotate the camera, is dependent on how much overlap you have between the images, right? So overlap is, I see a tree in one image, and then I rotate the camera to the next position, and I still want to see part of that tree so that the stitcher has a reference point to say, oh, that point's the same as this point, and it stitches them together. So that amount of overlap that you have is just dependent on how wide your lens is. If your lens is really wide, you don't need as much, you don't need as many intervals to get the same amount of overlap. That's all. But other than that, the process is the same. And we take exposures from a very high shutter speed, right? So let's say this is 1/8,000th, all the way down to a very low shutter speed. It could be whatever. Just depends on, literally, if we start at 1/8,000, then we go down in increments of either 1 or 2 EVs, and you can calculate it from there. So yeah, this is essentially the process. If you want to know more, I recommend you just check out this guy's page and just read some about what he's doing. And you guys should already have been familiar with this page, because this guy also hosts a lot of free HDR images that are great. So yeah, that was kind of fun. It was kind of fun to do it, and it was a beautiful location. I thought it would just be kind of cool to show you guys what we were doing, and kind of briefly talk about how we do it. It's very it's kind of weird. It's not a complicated process, but it's a very complicated process in the sense that, as you do with anything, as you try to get more and more accurate, you start to introduce more and more levels of complexity. Okay, Gigi, I have another question. How to use light to instruct the player's focus? So in its most basic sense, right? I'm putting light where I want the player to focus where he's going. I'm placing the lights where, hey, sometimes I think of the player like almost like a moth, right? So, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but just moths are attracted to light. So I keep placing lights in areas where I want him to. Eddie, we used to call it the moth pass. We do like the first pass you do, like just a playability pass. We just do like a moth pass so that the player can get an idea of where he's going. but I'm guiding the player with you know, very directly, just placing lights where I want him to look. I sometimes will guide him with color, for example. So a, you know, maybe warmer lights, like the player would be, I would use warmer lights to kind of guide the player to areas that I want him to pay attention to, and use colder lights to fill out areas where I'm not really, I'm not as, I don't want them to go. For example, when I worked on the zombie mode in the last Call of Duty, I would place certain lights in where the spawn closets were, right? So wherever the zombies came out, I would put like red lights or green lights or fuchsia or something depending on what the level was needed. But I would put a color, and I would use that color only for those areas, so that whenever the player would see, oh, there's orange over here, he knows like, oh, there's probably zombies coming out of somewhere over there. That's an area where that's going to happen. So that's another way to kind of inform the player. And then kind of getting back to like what I was talking about, I'll put that video, I'll make that video available to you guys. It's me just, you don't have to watch it. It's me just kind of going off on let me see if can I even find it? Just kind of going off on just the whole art side of things, and kind of showing you how they do it in games, how they do it in film, how they do it in traditional art. But it's really just, it's just a matter of that. It's just a matter of calling people's attention to whatever area you want them to be aware of, and using contrast or color to help do that, to help motivate that. And you don't have to overthink it too hard. It's not like there's a real, you know, it's not complicated. It's just a matter of like look at it this way. If you were going to play this level and nothing else mattered, if I said you only have one light or you only have 3 lights, where would you put them? You'd probably put them at the start, somewhere in the middle, and at the end, right? Or somewhere, you know, maybe around the corners, because, okay, I can trust a player to go in a straight line, but if he has to make a turn, I need to make that obvious to him. So you block it out that way. It's always healthy to look at your scene and think, what is the most basic thing I can do with this scene? What is the one most important thing? You know, if I had one light in this scene, probably the sunlight, maybe I'd want it to go this way so that it's highlighting where I'm going, or maybe coming this way so that the destination is what's lit up, as opposed to, you know, keeping it dark. But then again, you know, you could also say, well, I want the destination in shadow because I want to have these cool lights on the inside of it and make that attractive to you. It's really just making things interesting for the player. And one way to look at it is, if it looks interesting to you, it should be interesting to the player. It should be like, oh yeah, that's interesting. I want to see what's over there. I have a kid, my son, my older son, when, you know, we'd play video games, he would always know when I'm looking at stuff, because I would, you know, my character would just stop right here and everybody else would move along, and Omar's over here just looking at the lighting or looking at a shadow, or trying to figure out like why the volumetrics are doing what they're doing. You know, it's interesting to me. So I don't expect everybody to look at things in that level of detail, but and when I say everybody, I don't expect the players, the average player, the common player, to look at things in that level of detail. But it is kind of cool. It is cool to look at it. I am looking for that particular video. Let me see. Huh. I can post it. I'm not finding it right now, but I can post it. If you guys give me 1 second, you guys can listen to that plane flying overhead. Cool. Let's see, Bruno, what is your experience regarding the end of projects and the deadlines as a lighter? From my experience, it seems that they always get the worst part, as they have to wait for last minute changes in the environments to finalize their work and redo baking. It can get pretty hectic. You know, honestly, baking, like compile times are pretty, they're pretty well managed these days. So I don't really feel like, you know, oh my God, it's going to take like, you know, 4 hours to compile this level. That's not so much of an issue, but yes, we are downstream, and unfortunately, as production kind of ramps up and gets frantic, you know, it does get a little weird. It can get a little hectic. However, the VFX department has it worse, and the audio department has it worse than them. So that's kind of my measure of how bad things get. I think animation has it pretty good. They're usually done early. Um, Design tends to. It's been my experience, and this is not an indictment on any one designer, but design tends to always be the department that goes over the amount of time budgeted for what we're going to do, right? So if we say, great, we have 6 months to make this content, we're going to spend 2 months designing, we're going to spend 3 months arting and polishing, and we're going to spend 1 month optimizing and finalizing. Design will always, go 4 months. So part of it is just that there's this mentality of, well, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't play, it's not going to be fun, and we can't ship it. So design, there's this idea that design is, design has to be right no matter how long that takes. And it's understandable. However, we have a finite amount of resources and time to get stuff done. And so I have seen situations where we're running pretty low on time, and we have to kind of brute force things, or we have to compromise on how good something can look, or we have to outsource it. We have to farm it out either to another studio, like, for example, another studio that Activision is, owns, or, we outsource a lot. We also outsource a lot of assets and props and things like that. So it does get pretty frantic. Like I said, I can compile any of my levels right now. They'll compile in 20 minutes tops. Towards the end of production, we might see that go up to 45 minutes. Just because, or maybe an hour, just because there's more stuff in it. You just, at that point, there's, if you think of a level as a bucket, there's just more things in that bucket by the end of the production cycle, and it takes longer to process all that. But still, like, we're not talking about crazy times. When I was on Uncharted, on the first Uncharted, and a little bit on the second Uncharted, on the second Uncharted, we ended up getting a farm, like a render farm. But on the first one, I literally had 2 computers, and I would have one compiling the level locally, and then I'd switch to the other computer and work on a different level. And that other computer would just compile for 2 hours, and that was really tough as far as iterating. We also have things kind of like you see in Unreal. You can move the lights around in real time and see them update. We have similar tools, so the amount of dynamic lights that we can work with has gone up, which is good because it means that we can work with them interactively, and we don't have to wait for a compile to see what everything does. So our budgets for those lights have gone up, and that makes it a lot easier. And we're constantly getting new tools, new improvements, things that make iteration a little bit easier. But it does take time. And just like we saw this week where Unreal updated, they updated stuff and then other things broke, that happens. That happens in production all the time. And that's a big reason of why there's a certain point where we'll say, okay, there's no new content. We'll do or we'll start with a feature. We'll do a feature lock or a tools lock. There's no new tools after this point. There's no new features, if you will. So after this deadline, after September 3rd, we're only supporting stuff that's already in the game. And then at a certain point, there's no more design, no new design stuff. We're only supporting stuff that's designed. And then after a certain point, there's no new art. There's a content lock where that's it. There's no more art. We're not putting anything else into the game. All we're doing is fixing bugs or removing stuff. And you have to do that, or else it just becomes a mess. It becomes, there's always going to be a conflict. There's always going to be, we don't upgrade to new versions of software when we're in the last 6 months or the last 8 months of production, right? Because you're just introducing more variables, and we need things to be stable. We need to stabilize everything so that it's, we know what we're shipping. Just like we saw with Unreal, we got a new version of Unreal. All of a sudden, this level didn't work. Now we got to put resources into figuring out why that doesn't work and how to fix it. That happens all the time in games. So we definitely try to minimize that. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine who also has some teaching experience. He's an animator, and he was saying that, he was talking to a group, and they were kind of clowning him, saying like, "Oh, you're not even on the latest version of Maya. You're not even on the latest version of Maya." And we were just laughing, like, "Yeah, dude, we're not on the latest version of Maya because we're trying to get this project done. Like, this is something that you don't do. You don't just introduce you don't introduce something new when you're trying to lock stuff down." The tough thing about Unreal, and I just know this from my friends that work in Unreal, is that part of Unreal's contract, I believe, seems to say that it stipulates that when you release your game, it has to be released on the latest version of Unreal. So if we're in production and we're on version 19 and we're going to put this out and Unreal 20 comes out for 4.20, yikes, now we got to make sure that our stuff works on that. However, they do get a heads up. They do have early access to the builds, so it's not a surprise, but that is a added complication. And yeah, for sure, the bigger the studio, usually the older the tools. Don't ask me why. Well, I'll tell you why. It's because they're invested in those tools and they've been invested in those tools. And because they are so big, it's a lot harder for them to just switch, right? Whereas to like a small VFX house, it's easy for them to say, oh, we're using After Effects, but if we got to use Nuke, whatever, we'll get a license to Nuke and we'll get that done for the project. So that's why, but just be prepared for that usually the bigger the studio, the older and more difficult the tools are. It's just because they get invested in those tools, and because they're so big, it's hard for them to quickly pivot to something else. Okay, Junji, do you have some idea about the connection between light and emotion? You know what, Junji? Let me give you. I'm going to post this video up because I think I think it'll be helpful, and then I think we should talk a little bit more after that. But having that said, yeah, I mean it's all mood. Like when we say we're building a mood in a scene, we're trying to establish a mood. That to me is a very emotional process. How does the player feel? Does the player want to go here? Does the player not want to go here? Am I trying to make the player feel threatened or feel like he should be scared, or trying to make him feel invited and welcome? And to briefly touch on that, sometimes you can say that certain warm lights, like a warm kind of yellowish incandescent light, might feel a little more inviting into a room versus once again, what I would do in the zombie levels is I would try and intentionally use colors that felt a little creepy. Like I would use greens, I would use like pale greens and blues to kind of I would lean more on the greens because I think greens have this kind of sickly anemic color that usually when you see greens on things, it's kind of in a sickly kind of vibe, I guess is the best way I could put it. It's kind of a sickly kind of feeling. So I would play on those colors for those moments. I would use certain reds or fuchsias in areas kind of up high because they just felt a little weird. They felt off. If you look at my neighbor's car alarm's going off. If you look at some of the Batman comics, they're really interesting. They use a lot of those, like fluorescent fuchsia colors and greens and stuff. And it's always, and notice that the camera is always kind of tilted at an angle, like it's kind of tilted sideways a little bit so that the viewer kind of feels a little unstable. Like those are all choices. Those are all specific choices that somebody made to try and give a certain feel to an area. Let me see. I'm going to look for that video and I'm just going to post it up. Let me ask you guys a question. When I post something, so we talk about something in the forums and I post it, like, for example, we're talking about stuff right now. Does it make sense if I post it in week 5 or should I post it in week 6? Like, or does it like, I don't know if it's out of context if I put it in week 6, but then I don't know if people will miss it if I put it in week 5 because like maybe it's everybody moved on. So let me know what you guys prefer or what feels better for you guys. You get notified either way. Okay. All right. So maybe I'll do it in just week 5 just because it's relevant to what we're talking about. I think I need to upload that. I don't have it on any of my drives right now, on the cloud drives. So I'll have to upload it, but I can do that today. Okay. Cool, guys. We're about out of time. We got about 5 minutes left, but if anybody has anything they want to talk about, by all means, throw it out. Otherwise, I'll put that video up. And what was the other thing? There was I'll put this version of week 5 up. And if one or two of you would be so kind as to just download it and just verify for me that it is also working on your end in Unreal 4.20. That would be awesome. Any chances of, oh yeah, Eddie, I'm sorry. Let's do that right now. Apologize if I forgot about that. Give me your email right now, and I'll do it while we're here. And anybody else who wants to do that as well, just send me your email. Give me 1 second. 1 second. Yeah, if I forget, guys, just feel free to remind me. Don't. All right, let's see. We'll do Eddie at Hotmail. Copy. Bam. Let me know if you guys have issues with this too. Because I don't know why, there's a little bit of a window where like Facebook gives you like 24 hours or something, and then you have to send the invite again. It's kind of silly. All right, here's John. Boom. And yeah, anybody else, let me know. Let's see, Bruno, out of context, but I landed a new position at Ubisoft. Oh, congrats. And I believe the work I did in this course helped convincing them, not as a lighter, but as a level artist though. So thanks, dude. That is awesome, man. Congrats. You know, and honestly, I mean, I appreciate you saying the work you did here helped. I'm happy if that's the case, but I'm sure that you did a lot of hard work on your end to get in there, and that's not to be overlooked. So that's awesome, man. Congrats. Are you in Canada? Are you at Ubisoft Canada, or are you in the UK, or where are you at? Coming off mobile games, so showing some AAA screenshots helped. Yeah, Montreal. Cool. Man, I know that Unreal Ubisoft is a big place. I know there's a lot of people. I've never been there. I have a friend of mine. She's a tech artist. Her name is Grace Fong. If you run into her, say hi. Tell her Omar says hi. And she's cool people. I know a few people up there, but Grace went up there most recently. That's awesome, man. And before we wrap it up, let me just look at this Facebook page and okay, you guys are invited. Let me know if you can get in or not. I just want to make sure that there's not like a accept button that I have to push. It should be okay. Should be all right. Out of line 2, but I would like to know if I would like to know your opinion on something. Okay, sure. Yep. And you feel free to put it up here, or if you want to email me privately, you can do that as well. But you know, if you're cool with it, put it up here so everybody can see. Yeah, and with that, guys, as we start to wrap it up, thanks again for your patience this week with the issues with the scene, and just with having to take an extended kind of push this week. That didn't mean to have to do that, but something came up. But I do appreciate it. Okay, let's see, John. Would you think it is easy to transition between VFX and cinematic lighting and game lighting? I mean, cinematic lighting and game lighting, yeah, for sure. And it depends. Like a lot of studios will, you know, like they will farm out some of the more. We'll talk about this in week 7 and 8, by the way. But some studios will farm out some of the pre-rendered cinematics, and that's why you see things like, you know, like the pre-rendered cutscenes that come out of like Blur or something like a studio like that. Those are farmed out, and then those are integrated and played back as cutscenes or as quick times. And then there's cutscene lightings that are done in-game, what they call IGCs, in-game cutscenes. And those are, in some cases, like, for example, Naughty Dog has a lighting department, and within that lighting department, they have level lighters, and then they have like a couple of just cinematic lighters, because they have so many cinematics. You know, you play a Naughty Dog game, and they have like an hour and a half of cinematics of just like movies. It's like watching a movie. So they'll break it up that way. For example, on Call of Duty, we will probably not break it up that way. If there's a specific cinematic scene that happens, we'll probably handle that. We'll probably handle those in-house, and then yes, there will probably be some pre-rendered like load screen cinematics that will farm out to somebody else. So it just kind of depends on what the nature of your company is. For example, I would imagine that Ubisoft would probably have a cinematic department. Blizzard has a cinematic department that does all their high-end cinematics. The level lighters don't do that. So it depends. And then depending on what the structure of those departments is, or what the structures of those departments are, it might be a little bit harder, a little bit easier. It's just every studio is different. VFX seems to be a little bit more, well, I'm also talking about AAA game development. Like that's a little bit more specialized. I don't really know any of the tools that they're working with. And these guys are working with, basic stuff like setting up sprite sequences in Maya or Max, or they're doing complicated stuff like setting up, full fluid simulations in Houdini, and then capturing that. Or they're doing, we have like a VFX team that does all the smoke, fire, explosions, stuff like that. And then we have a destruction team that does things like buildings falling down and walls getting broken and, windows getting shot out or lights getting shot out, stuff like that. So it really depends on the nature of the production. However, the smaller the studio, the more you being a generalist will help, right? So the smaller the studio, the more they want to know that, cool, if we get into a bind, we know that John can help out with VFX, and we know that John can help out with texturing, or whatever the case may be. The larger the studio, the more they will probably want you to be focused on a specific craft, meaning you're going to light the levels, you're going to light the gameplay, and we know that you got that. And we're not going to ask you to take time out of what you're doing to also set up, sprite emitters or anything like that. So it just kind of depends. But a good way to think about it is you have a little bit more, it's a little bit easier to move around at a smaller studio. However, realistically, the quality or the level, the quality of the work that you're going to be doing is going to be limited by the size of the team and the amount of money in the production and the amount of resources that you have in the engine. So it's kind of a inversely proportional scale, if you will. That's not to discourage you. I've actually been considering, I've been considering like how many more of these games do I want to work on? And I do have friends that work in VR on very small little productions that, not very many people are going to experience, but it seems really cool and they seem to have fun. And I think there's something about working in a small studio with, 50 to 100 people that, just getting stuff done that to me seems kind of fun. So I don't mean to discourage anybody from that. And it's something that I myself am considering at some point. Let's see, in a city such as Montreal with a big industry in both VFX and games, I personally think it would be fairly easy. Yeah. I mean, and John, I'm answering your question from the perspective of I'm a VFX artist at Infinity Ward and I want to move into lighting at Infinity Ward. It's always easier if you are going to go from, hey, I just got done over at, Treyarch and now I want to go to Ubisoft and my skill set is changing a little bit. At that point, because you have experience shipping games and if you can show some personal work that shows that you know what you're doing with effects, I think it'd be a lot easier. Yes. So just to be clear, my initial answer was based on moving within departments at the same studio. And I hope that's, hopefully that sounds fair. Bruno, I hope that sounds fair to you. I think it is easier. I also think it's easier, as you guys are working and you might start off as a junior artist, or you might start off, making, lower end of the scale as far as salary. It's always easier to go somewhere else and ask for more money than it is to try and get a raise. You'll get a raise at work, but no one's going to give you a $15,000 raise, right? It's a lot easier to go and get a new job somewhere else as a senior lighting artist or as a whatever. And that's, unfortunately, like it leads to change, but it is, you will advance much faster that way than you will by staying in one place. It was more in the sense of working in the industry in a cinematic studio in Budapest, but I'm considering switching to games. Okay, cool. I think that coming from cinematics and when you say lighting cinematic studio, do you guys do like 3D pre-rendered like cinematics, or do you guys do like visual effects? Yeah, that's true, Jeff. Yeah, pre-rendered. But are you doing like cinematics for games? Because I think if you have a background in, yeah. Oh, you work at Digic, dude. We use Digic for our for a lot of our cinematics. That's crazy. Yeah, we use Digic a lot. I think we don't really. I know how I worked on some. Why are you taking my class then, dude? You know what we're doing over there. That's funny, man. Yeah, dude, we do a lot of we use Digic a lot. Yeah, I think that it would be I don't think it would be that tough. You know, I think that you might, and this class is a good example where you can do some work in this class and show like, look, this is how my skills translate into gameplay, into game levels. And mind you, you know, we're taking this class, like the examples that we're doing in this class is really just to get you to understand and be comfortable and know what you're doing. I encourage you to continue to work on your own projects, continue to you know, just get scenes, talk to your friends, build stuff yourself, or, you know, build like little simple scenes, or talk to, maybe you have a friend or a student that's also a student, or that's like an environment guy, and you can do a little, you know, I'll light you, you know, you give me a level and I'll give you lighting and we'll help each other out kind of a thing. You know, I encourage you to continue to light and to apply these skills. But yeah, man, I think you can do that. That's awesome. Before we go, is anyone else having trouble getting the project to load with 420 or 419? That's kind of, I'm using, really you're using I was able to get it to run in 419. I haven't heard of anybody that had an error with 419. Make sure that because you know, when you start the project, right, you got the project and it'll say, hey, this is done in an older engine. Do you want to make a copy? And then you say yes, it makes a copy of the scene. That copy that it made is 420. So just make sure you're not trying to open 420 with 419. You know what I mean? Make sure that if you open up Unreal 419, you go to make sure you open the file that was created in 419, not 420. Yes, of course. And your course is helping a lot in that sense. Thank you for that. My pleasure, John. Yeah, guys, I wish you the best. I really, it's exciting to me that you guys are getting stuff out of this class. I want you to enjoy it. I want you to feel like it is giving you a tool set that you can apply in the field. So yeah, man, awesome. Okay, guys, why don't we wrap it up? Have a great weekend. I don't know about you guys over here in the States. It is a long weekend, so we get Monday off, and I'm going to take advantage of some sleep that I usually miss out at. Canada as well. Awesome, Bruno. Yeah, awesome, guys. My pleasure. I'm happy to be back. Not in Europe, sorry, buddy. Sorry, John. It's okay. I'm sure you get days that we don't get. Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. I do appreciate it. I'll post some links on the forums for week 5. Hopefully that'll help. And yeah, have a great weekend. Thanks again. Look forward to next week. Let me know if anybody has any issues with the scene. Hopefully it was just scene 5. Cool. All right, everybody. Thank you.